Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. The world stands on the edge of an unprecedented economic conflict between its two largest powers. Today, November 4th, 2025, a dramatic U.S. ultimatum to China threatens to unravel decades of global integration. This is more than a trade dispute, it's a battle for technological supremacy and the future rules of the global order. As Washington and Beijing make their next moves, the fate of billions and the shape of the 21st century hang in the balance. This crisis is the result of years of mounting friction, a slow buildup of tension that has shaped the global economic landscape. For decades, the United States and China have been locked in a complex relationship, one marked by cooperation, competition, and growing suspicion. What began as cautious optimism in the late 20th century, with hopes that economic integration would foster mutual understanding, has instead given way to a climate of rivalry and distrust. At the heart of this conflict are two fundamentally different economic systems, one driven by state-led planning and the other by free market capitalism. These differences have fueled misunderstandings and policy clashes, as each side seeks to protect its own interests and way of life. Hopes that integrating China into the global economy would lead to political liberalization and fairer trade practices have faded. Instead, China's rapid economic ascent has sparked deep U.S. concerns over intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and a growing trade deficit. Congressional hearings and media headlines have amplified these anxieties, painting a picture of a zero-sum contest. The first major shots in this economic standoff were fired during President Trump's earlier term, when tariffs and counter-tariffs became the new language of diplomacy. The trade war of 2018-2020 was only the beginning, setting the stage for even greater confrontations. In April 2025, the situation escalated dramatically. President Trump threatened to impose a staggering 104% tax on all Chinese imports, a move that sent shockwaves through global markets. This was quickly followed by sweeping new tariffs, targeting a wide range of goods and industries. The U.S. also introduced strict export controls aiming to choke off China's access to advanced technologies, especially in critical sectors like semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and telecommunications. These measures were designed not just to address trade imbalances, but to curb China's technological ambitions. China responded in kind, announcing its own set of counter-tariffs and restrictions. Each move by the U.S. was met with a swift and calculated response from Beijing, creating a cycle of retaliation that deepened mistrust and made compromise increasingly elusive. What began as a dispute over trade imbalances has now evolved into a direct struggle for technological dominance. Both nations are racing to lead in fields like artificial intelligence, 5G, and quantum computing, seeing technological supremacy as the key to future power and security. Now, a dramatic ultimatum has transformed what was once a simmering trade dispute into a full-blown geopolitical showdown. The world watches anxiously as two superpowers stand on the brink, their actions shaping not just their own futures but the fate of the global order itself. On October 21, 2025, President Trump, standing shoulder to shoulder with the Australian Prime Minister, delivered a message that reverberated across the globe. In a packed White House press room with cameras flashing and world leaders watching, he issued what would become his administration's boldest ultimatum yet, a move that would send shockwaves through international markets and diplomatic circles alike. The message was clear: unless a new trade deal was reached by November 1st, the United States would impose tariffs of up to 155% on all Chinese goods entering the country. This was not just another threat in the ongoing trade war, it was a dramatic escalation, a line drawn in the sand that left little room for compromise. Headlines blared, analysts scrambled, and businesses on both sides of the Pacific braced for impact. This was not a mere negotiating tactic, it was economic brinkmanship at its most intense, a high-stakes gamble that threatened to sever China from the lucrative U.S. market entirely. Wall Street traders watched nervously as markets fluctuated, and shipping companies wondered if their cargo would soon be caught in the crossfire. The world's two largest economies now stood on the edge of a precipice. To tighten the screws even further, the White House announced sweeping new export controls on critical software and technology, targeting sectors vital to China's ambitions. The administration's demands were uncompromising and far-reaching. First, China must end the practice of forced technology transfers, a long-standing grievance for American companies operating overseas. U.S. officials insisted that American innovation could no longer be handed over as the price of doing business in China. Second, the protection of U.S. intellectual property had to be guaranteed. Decades of alleged IP theft had cost American businesses billions, and the administration was determined to put a stop to it once and for all. Third, the ballooning trade deficit between the two nations had to be addressed. The U.S. demanded concrete steps to reduce the gap, insisting that fairer trade would benefit both economies in the long run. And finally, China was urged to buy significantly more American goods, from agricultural products to advanced technology, helping to restore balance and support U.S. industries at home. Yet, even as the pressure mounted, President Trump left a diplomatic door open. Plans were quickly set in motion for a high-stakes meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, signaling that negotiation was still possible, even as tensions soared. Around the world, governments, investors, and ordinary citizens watched anxiously. Would China yield to the mounting pressure, or would the standoff spiral into a deeper crisis, with consequences for the entire global economy? The stakes had never been higher, and the world could only wait to see what would happen next. Beijing didn't back down. Instead, it responded with a carefully orchestrated counterattack, signaling to the world that it was prepared to defend its interests with equal force. The Chinese government convened high-level meetings, and officials made it clear that any pressure would be met with decisive action. In a swift move, China imposed tariffs on $75 billion worth of U.S. goods, directly targeting American exports. These tariffs were not random. They were calculated to inflict maximum political and economic pain, especially in regions of the U.S. that were crucial to the administration's support base. Among the hardest hit were American farmers and energy producers. Exports like soybeans and oil, which are vital to the U.S. economy and heavily produced in politically sensitive states, suddenly faced steep barriers. This move sent shockwaves through rural America, where many livelihoods depend on these exports. But China didn't stop at agricultural and energy products. In a bold escalation, it announced restrictions on the export of gallium and germanium, two minerals that are absolutely essential for manufacturing semiconductors, advanced electronics, and military technology. This strategic move exposed just how dependent the West, especially the US and Europe, had become on Chinese raw materials. China is the world's dominant supplier of these minerals, and the sudden restrictions sent alarm bells ringing in capitals across the globe. Almost overnight, global supply chains were thrown into disarray, shipping delays mounted, warehouses scrambled to find alternative sources, and tech companies faced the real possibility of production slowdowns or even shutdowns. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a leading expert on international trade, described China's actions as a masterstroke of economic strategy. She explained that by weaponizing its dominance in critical minerals, China had gained powerful leverage over its rivals. The world watched as China flexed its industrial muscle, reminding everyone that control over resources can be just as powerful as control over markets or technology. The impact was immediate and severe. Stock markets reacted with volatility, tech companies saw their share prices tumble, and workers in semiconductor factories faced growing uncertainty about their jobs. The vulnerabilities in Western supply chains, long ignored or underestimated, were now impossible to deny. News outlets ran headline after headline about the unfolding crisis, and governments scrambled to respond. Through these actions, China sent a clear message. It would not be a passive victim in the trade war, but a formidable adversary, ready to use every tool at its disposal to protect its interests. The trade war had entered a new, unpredictable phase, one where economic power, resource control, and political will would all be tested in ways the world had never seen before. Nowhere did China's mineral restrictions hit harder than in the Netherlands, home to ASML, the world's sole maker of advanced EUV lithography machines. ASML's stock plunged 15% as panic gripped the Dutch market. The company's machines, essential for global chip production, rely on minerals now restricted by China. The Dutch government, caught between U.S. pressure and Chinese retaliation, scrambled for solutions. ASML's predicament revealed the fragility of global tech supply chains and the far-reaching consequences of the U.S. China conflict. In this new era, even neutral nations find themselves on the front lines. The trade war's shockwaves are global, ensnaring U.S. allies and partners. South Korea, heavily dependent on exports, faces impossible choices as Washington pressures it to cut ties with China. Companies like Samsung are caught between their biggest market and their key security ally. The U.S. China Business Council warns the tariffs could cost the U.S. economy 1,700,000 jobs over 5 years. Consumers worldwide face higher prices, while investment and growth stall amid uncertainty. Politically, alliances are strained as partners balk at America's confrontational tactics. The world's economic fabric is fraying, and old alliances are under stress. Experts warn that China's mineral restrictions exploit a critical vulnerability in global tech supply chains. Dr. Evelyn Reed notes this is a direct challenge to U.S. technological dominance. Political analysts see both Trump and Xi under intense domestic pressure to appear strong, making compromise elusive. Economists argue tariffs are a tax on consumers and businesses, not a fix for trade deficits. Decoupling from China would take years and cost trillions, with massive inefficiencies for Western firms. Most experts agree. While grievances are real, all-out economic war risks far greater harm than benefit. The world faces a dangerous experiment with no guaranteed winners. Behind the headlines, ordinary people bear the brunt of the trade war. U.S. farmers lose their biggest market. Chinese factory workers face layoffs as orders dry up. Consumers everywhere pay more for everyday goods, with the poorest hit hardest. Small businesses hesitate to invest, and young people face shrinking job prospects. International research and collaboration stall as national security concerns rise. The conflict erodes stability, opportunity, and hope for millions. The true cost of this war is measured in disrupted lives and lost potential. The world stands at a crossroads, confrontation or cooperation. The upcoming Trump-Xi summit offers a slim chance to de-escalate, but deep tensions remain. Real progress will require compromise and a recognition that no one wins a trade war. The global community must work together to set fair rules and build resilient supply chains. Citizens must stay informed and demand constructive engagement from leaders. The challenge is to find a new balance that accommodates China's rise while upholding fairness and the rule of law. The world waits, hoping for wisdom and for bridges, not walls.